Hey everybody, it's GauntletX, and welcome to the Modern Horizons 3 Arena Open Day 2 Draft Number 1. This is one of the highest stakes draft events on Arena. It's going to be a best of 3 Modern Horizons 3 draft, where we are competing trying to win at least 3 out of the next 4 rounds. If we manage to do that, then we qualify for Day 2 Draft Number 2, where there are cash prizes up to $2,000 on the line. Luckily, we did make it in on our second attempt of the Arena Open Day 1, so basically no matter what, we're going to be up in gyms here, which is pretty nice, but it would still be really sweet to at least get to draft another deck and see how it all does in this competitive event. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the draft and see where the cards take us today. Alright, so for our pack 1 pick 1, we have an excellent mythic here. We've got Uggin's Binding, the 3-mana instant to bounce a non-land permanence you don't control to its owner's hand. That part isn't super insane, but it's not a bad card at all. What is so powerful about this is there are tons of Eldrazi that cost 7 mana at common, so it's really easy to draft around this card to where you cast this early game and then later, whenever you cast a 7-mana Eldrazi, you almost just win on the spot. You bounce each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, so you just bounce your opponent's entire board back to their hand and swing in with everybody. So Uggin's Binding, an incredible reason to try to be like green-blue Eldrazi, green-blue Ramp, which is where Annoyed Altasaur is going to play incredibly well. It's one of the strongest cards in this pack. It's a 2-for-1 no matter what, a gigantic 6/5 reach trample plus another spell. There's other great options like Galvanic Discharge towards an energy deck for cheap removal, Horrific Assault for cheap removal, but I think our first pick of Uggin's Binding is a card that is really, really powerful in one specific archetype, and it's going to have us lean that direction out of pretty equally powerful cards like this. So we take the Altasaur here. Now for pack 1 pick 3, the Malevolent Rumble is a great way to set up big late game plays. It can pull out the big creature we want to cast from our deck, or pull out the land if we don't have enough right now, and it gives us the spawn to ramp into them as well, so Rumble's a great card for this archetype. Hit that heralds the end is also fine. Aether Spike, not so much. I find green-blue is probably the worst of the blue color pairs at holding up mana for a counterspell, because you're really just going to be tapping out for a bunch of mana dorks early and then tapping out for big plays later. So hard to hold up those counters. I'm going to take Malevolent Rumble here. Pick 4. This pack is really bad. There's nothing exciting for any deck. There are filler, just role filler cards like Precursor or Sentry or something for various decks. But yeah, I mean, this pack is super, super bad. Nothing here you would want to take anywhere close to pick 4. I guess we just take Precursor as the closest towards the kind of ramp deck we're trying to play. Like, Electrozo is just not playable without being a dedicated energy deck. That's the only on-color card. I guess we could just speculate on the landscape over the Precursor, but like, either way, we'd be speculating off-color. Alright, pick 5 is significantly better. There's a Warped Tusker to go with our Uggin's Binding, or a Fanged Flames for cheap removal. Really want to find the cards to synergize with Uggin's Binding, but I feel like these 7-mana common Eldrazi creatures tend to go decently late. We can find them a lot more often than we can find efficient removal like Fanged Flames. I feel like I can take this Fanged Flames and still expect to get a few 7-mana Eldrazi later in the draft. Plus, we've already got one 7-drop. This one doesn't work with the Uggin's Binding, but we can't overload and have like 5 7-drop cards in this deck, unless they all have cycling like the Tuskers. I'm going to take the cheap interaction. I just think everyone's interested in that versus the 7-drop Eldrazi. There's just less players that are looking for those. Pick 6, pretty easy Petrifying Meddler here. This Roshin here is just not a super good Gruul card. Doesn't do anything unless you have X mana or more cards. Now I am interested definitely in some of those like green-red landscapes and stuff, because we're starting to look a little more like green-red splash blue towards the Binding, but there's no good green or red card here, so take Meddler first. Pick 7, Serum Visionary towards blue. Yep. I mean, again, we are committed to an Eldrazi deck that's trying to play 7 mana value colorless spells. So we're blue, red, and green. We're some combination of these colors. We take the Serum Visionary. Pick 8 is a very bad pack. Void Pouncer is the closest to anything we'd be interested in. Okay, we found a green-blue landscape. Pick 9. Perfectly fine over Aether Spike. Although, we're only 2 cards deep into green, and green is starting to dry up. Last green card we saw was the Warped Tusker we passed. Is there a world where we pivot onto blue-red energy for the Aether Spike? I think there actually is. Take the Aether Spike here. If green really dries up, maybe blue-red energy is actually going to be a great spot to be. Wheel of Potential doesn't really do anything. Skyclaw is kind of mediocre even in that deck. I feel like Meddler's just the best card for either deck. Yeah, and we wheel all the Aether Spikes. So this maybe looks like a better draft pod for energy. Interesting. Wheel the Electrozoa. Yeah. Alright. Act 2, pick 1. We find a Drownyard Lurker to go with the Ugin's Binding. Probably got to take that pretty highly. We're taking it over Utter Insignificance, but we have 2 Aether Spike and a Fanged Flames to permanently deal with something, and we have an Ugin's Binding to bounce something so we can Aether Spike it later. I think we're decent enough on interaction to take Drownyard Lurker as basically the perfect 7-drop to go with Ugin's Binding, because even if we don't play green, it's gonna work. I suppose Unstable Amulet is potentially stronger for just general blue-red energy stuff. Although it doesn't work well with counterspells at all, does it? You may play it till you exile another card with it. I guess it does still kind of tax your opponent. It's an interesting option. But yeah, now that I'm maybe going blue-red and not even like splashing towards green, I actually kind of want to take the 7-drop Eldrazi pretty highly, because if we're blue-red, there's only one on-color 7-drop Eldrazi at common, and that is Drownyard Lurker. If we're not playing the green for the Tusker, then that's the only option. Back to pick 2 is quite a bad pack for everybody except Boros, pretty much. An Evangel and a Conduit Goblin for that. This is almost a complete miss. We just take a green-blue landscape. Pick 3. Another Skittering Precursor. If we take a bunch of landscapes, could be ramping up into the 7-drop Eldrazi's we try to play. Also a green-red landscape. Or a green splash, but again, it's not on color to blue-red, which are the 2 main colors right now. I feel like another Precursor looks the best here. Pick 4. Sink into Stupor is actually a card that's really impressed me. The spell part itself is already really good, and you have the backup plan if you have a hand with a really low land count of being able to play it as a land. So I like Sink into Stupor a lot. And I'm going to take that here over actually the best green cards we've seen in a while, mainly just Horrific Assault for cheap green removal. Another Fanged Flames looks great here. Pretty mediocre green. And Tempest Harvester is reasonable in blue, but like that cheap removal. Pick 6. Splash in a Nyxborn Hydra, or play a Glimpse the Impossible for Eldrazi spawn tokens. Play a big Eldrazi early towards Ugin's Binding nonsense. Again, just not a super exciting pack here, but I think Glimpse it is. Another Drownyard Lurker is perfect. Take that here. Dang, we are seeing late Horrific Assaults. Haven't seen any of the good little Death Touch mana ramp cards or the Eldrazi spawn producing 3-drops or anything. We aren't seeing like my favorite non-removal spell commons out of green, but we're seeing the removal. So there could have been a world where we just stuck fast on green with the green 7-drop over the red removal spell there in the first pack. Then like try to get this Void Craw here. It would have been fine. I mean, maybe we can still do that and treat red as the splash, because we're not that deep to red. We just have these Fanged Flames, so I can still take this Void Craw over a third Aether Spike, I think. Now, an Utter Insignificance is very easy. Yeah, maybe we can try to do it this way. Electrozoa ends up getting cuts. This is definitely not super simple draft pod for us. Cards are all mediocre again. There's also just, yeah, a lot of like random mediocre packs. Like this one. A lot of bad rares getting opened up. Yeah, the bad rares continue. They will continue until morale improves. Alright, pack 3, pick 1. Oh, we found a good rare. And it's a black rare. It's double black too, so it's really not splashable. Grab another 7-drop colorless spell to go with Ugin's Binding, I think. Love to wheel a deep analysis. I think blue's been decently open. It's possible. Like, we got 2 Sink into Stupors in the same pack relatively late. Pack 2, I think. So we could maybe take Tusker, get analysis back. We're not going to get Bridgeworks Battle back. But we've got Double Flames, Utter Insignificance for resolved threats, Aether Spike to counter threats, and Binding and Sink to bounce them. We're doing pretty solid on interaction. Ah, more black rares. I mean, what can you do? You can't control the color of the rares that are opened up. If I was completely omniscient, I guess we would be in black right now and just scoop up all the rares for free. Aragast is kind of cute here. Double red towards the emerge is going to be a little difficult off the splash, though. Still might be better than like an Utter Insignificance or a Brain Surge. 9 mana is a lot if we don't emerge it. I'm not playing Emperor Bones. Yeah, I'll take this thing. Maybe we can try that out. Another Utter Insignificance. At least we're getting all the Utter Insignificances that we could ever need. And all the Aether Spikes. Let's see. I mean, we're probably dropping all this nonsense. 19 non-lands right now. Take another landscape and another insignificance. No, I think I'll take another insignificance here. We just need like 3 red sources probably for 2 Fanged Flames. Demon Fury is a very, very efficient bounce spell. That is the best on-color card. Or it's a green-blue landscape. Take a Demon Inferior. I guess our strategy here, our game plan, is to just be annoying until we resolve a bunch of 7-drops. Where maybe Void Craw is slightly better than Depth Defiler, but this card is just such a good enter the battlefield effect, even without colorless mana spent on it, that I think I'm going Defiler over Void Craw. I mean, the curve does really warrant another Void Craw, which is rough, because Defiler is a much better card in a vacuum. No, our curve is so bad right now, I think we need another double ramper. I'm going to take the Void Craw there, and here's a Malevolent Rumble for another ramper. Let's go. We're actually getting enough blue ways to interact. We might not even splash the red. We can just do this. We get a Serum Visionary or a third Void Craw. I think Visionary is such a good value play. I take it over a third Void Craw. We can't really do Battle Wagon things. We've got a little bit of energy, but not enough for that. I'm going to take Serum Visionary. Incredible way to dig for our important cards. Tune the Narrative is not very good in this deck. We only have 2 ways to spend energy, and neither of them really need more energy to be decent. I think we take a Dread Mask. even though that one's technically not a colorless spell. Which is a little awkward. Alright, wheel all the utter insignificances in the universe, and here is our blue-green Eldrazi ramp pile. I mean, it looks like a very synergistic little blue-green ramp deck. The awkward part is that this is one of the weaker archetypes, so even though it looks like a pretty strong build of it, pretty much exactly what you would want, and still have some issues. I don't think there was anything considerably stronger we really could have ended up building here. If I did fully lock in on green instead of taking that Fanged Flames bouncing around towards red, then the deck would have ended up a little better. But I think the flexibility was probably worth it in case we did find that blue-red energy was pretty open. And it was like decently open. Like we could have done Generatorium nonsense, but this card's really, really narrow. We didn't get any of the stronger, more consistent payoffs for that kind of build, so just kind of kept on blue Eldrazi stuff in the end. Yeah, I don't have a photographic memory or anything, but looking back on the draft pod, I think couldn't have gone much better by the end of it. But we could have had like another Tusker over the Fanged Flames there. And if we had taken the Tusker over that Fanged Flames, that was a pack 1 decision, and stuck on green, that probably would have led to, in those future packs where we were seeing the cheap green removal, we probably would have just taken the cheap green removal because we wouldn't have had any speculations any other direction. So the biggest thing I think we actually missed out on were being able to run a couple copies of the 1 green mana, one of your creatures deals damage to an opponent's creature and you gain life. You gain 2 life when you do it. I think those would have been decent in this deck, but come to think of it, like, those 1 green mana removal spells don't work in this deck at all until we have a 5-drop or bigger creature out anyway, so they're not even that great, so it might actually just be better that we have Utter Insignificances instead of the green removal spell, because we don't have cheap, beefy creatures. So the green removal spell is actually a very late game play, even if it is only 1 green mana to cast. So yeah, all in all, I think this is very close to the best build we could have had. We certainly could have had more options. It would have been better to be locked in on green earlier, because worst case scenario, those little green removal spells and stuff like that become sideboard options for us for specific matchups. Like, that's the worst case scenario. Maybe our main deck ends up very, very similar to what it is right now, where I'm probably just going to cut like a wave breaker here, call it good. But we would have had more interaction in the sideboard for options there. Again, though, I don't know if we would main deck the little green removal spells, because our cheap creatures aren't good at shooting things, and we have a lot of interaction here with 3 Utter Insignificances for resolved threats, 3 bounce spells, and 2 counters. Yeah, main deck would probably be very similar to what it is now. So, I mean, we'd cut a 2 in the narrative for one of those at least. Something like that. But, yeah. Weird draft pod, weird draft. But very reasonable synergistic deck at the end of it. Probably one of the better decks we could have ended up in this pod. Gotta cross our fingers a bit, hope for some solid matchups for us. We could get overrun by some Boros aggro-y stuff. And probably it for really scary matchups. If we're against a big Eldrazi deck, like, we can counter their plays, we can bounce the big creatures, we can insignificance them and just beat them down with our own Eldrazi's. I feel like that matchup's pretty reasonable for us. I think the scariest stuff is getting overrun by really quick decks, because our cheap creatures are not the greatest blockers ever. But yeah, we have solid interaction for late game, and basically any game that we draw Ugin's Binding, we're probably going to win. If we draw Ugin's Binding and a 7-drop Eldrazi later. But it's just so high impact that you get to spend 7 and cast a giant creature, and then for free exile your opponent's whole board. Well, not exile, bounce your opponent's whole board. So then everything you have on board just gets in for damage, and they have to spend their next turn recasting everything, and puts them super far behind. So quick peek at the mana before we lock in. We have 16 blue cards and only 6 greens, so we definitely want 9th island. 9 islands, 7 forests. We also have a Sink into Stupor we could play as another blue source in a pinch. I don't want to go really low on green sources because we do have good double green cards at the top of our curve, but blue is by far the more important color, so we might be able to go as far as 10-6 split here. We're a slow enough deck where we're not going to curve out perfectly, efficiently, that we definitely run the landscape just to turn it into either a forest or an island whenever we need it. We're going to have plenty of games where we don't have a 2-drop to play. We don't have a 1-drop to play turn 1 or a 2-drop to play turn 2, so we can landscape crack on either of those turns without slowing down our curve at all. Or on turn 4, we're basically always playing a 3-drop and having a 4th mana left over. We can crack a landscape turn 4. There's plenty of time that we'll have to crack a landscape without slowing the deck down, so we're definitely running that. I think I am going to go 10-6 in the end, since we do have the landscape towards actually 7 green sources. The earliest green card we need to play immediately is Voidcraw at 3 mana. Rumble's like fine later, but Voidcraw really need to play that down turn 3, ideally. But for blue, we need to have Tune up turn 1, Harvester, and Aether Spikes up turn 2. We need Visionaries on 3, and double blue on turn 4, and I'm pretty happy with 10-6 here. But now that that's out of the way, let's call it a deck here and see how things go as we head into round 1. Alright, here we are on the play for game 1 of round number 1. We've got our turn 2 Rumble here to do a little bit of ramping. We've got a Sink into Stupor to hold up as a little bounce counter spell to slow our opponent down, and it looks like it's going to be necessary. White is one of the most aggressive colors in the format. That is going to be one of the scariest matchups for us. Basically any white deck, green-white, red-white, blue-white, all these decks could try to overrun us before we get to our big end game. So we are starting the event off with a pretty bad matchup, not where I would want it to be. And it is going to be green-white. That is going to make their creatures really beefy, really quick. Lots of great ways to get +1/+1 counters and auras and equipment on the board super quickly. Luckily, we do have at least one piece of our cheap interaction here with the Sink into Stupor, and they start with just some mana ramp, so it's not going to be the quickest in the world. If I cast another Malevolent Rumble here, then we'll have 6 mana up next turn to play a Dreadmask. But I won't be holding up Sink into Stupor this turn. I guess Sink into Stupor can hit resolved threats as well, so I think we can afford to Rumble again here. Set up an early Dreadmask as a large blocker. Well, this might be wrong, but I'm taking Altasaur there over the Petrifying Meddler. Trying to set that up as the way that we stabilize getting 2 blockers. Yeah, so they're going to curve into Area Auxiliary. Guess a Sink would have been good to counter the ability as well here, but that does mean we only take 2 damage this turn, which gives me the time I need to Sink into Stupor this turn and then Altasaur next turn, and then I have a gigantic reach creature to block the Auxiliary, and I get probably 2 blockers off the Altasaur. Yeah, so we're going to Sink into Stupor the Germ token, probably. I could Sink the Kite, but if they want to spend 4 mana to re-equip, that's fine. That's way less efficient than them just recasting the Kite for another 1/1 flyer. Okay. So bounce the Germ here, take 5, go to 12. And then drop all the blockers with Altasaur. Try to get stable from there. We drop that, and then we're casting something big pretty much every turn from that point on. This all lands? Wow, yeah, that's a sad Rumble for them. Although, I think they might have missed a land drop. No, they didn't. They were on the draw here. This turn 4, it's their 4th land. Alright, Slith. Sure. Not great for us. Something's going to get in for sure, even if they don't have removal. Okay, Aether Spike's the draw. Well, it makes it less likely we hit an Aether Spike off the Altasaur. That would be the worst hit we could have. So as long as we don't hit an Aether Spike, Altasaur should be solid here. Come on, creature. Alright, I'll take it. 1/3 body. That's enough to block a Hex Gold Slith if they don't put the flying onto it. Also makes it easier to cast multiple spells next turn. Would really like to play a Drown Yard Lurker next turn, so really hoping our Void Craw doesn't die. That'd be 2 blockers off that one spell. Although if we can be in a position where we can hold up Aether Spike, that's also probably for the best. Yes, their best play is to throw that there. They have 2 mana up for a trick, so they probably are killing the Altasaur here. But I can't just, like, take 6. 1 and a green. Well, a white and a green if they need it. Well, any 2 colors of mana, basically. So any 2 mana trick. I think I have to block the auxiliary because most tricks we'd trade here, but we would just lose Altasaur without killing anything if I block the Slith because of the first strike. Yeah, almost any trick, we actually get to kill auxiliary and their combat trick. But if I block Slith, all I get is the combat trick. Yeah, this is way better than if I blocked Slith. Still not great, because now I am needing to deal with the Slith quickly, which means I have to actually just Serum Visionary. We just dig for ways to deal with flyers here. Yeah, we need to do some digging, or that kills us in 2 swings. It hits for 4, then it hits for 5. We have a bunch of bounce spells in the deck, though, and any of those would work great. Okay, there's one Utter Insignificance. I do have the colorless mana off of Void Craw. And I haven't played a land this turn, so I can play land 6, 2 mana to play this, and 3 mana to exile. We can fully deal with the Slith right now. Oh, and I can't. I'm not drawing that right now. I have to wait till next turn. Shoot. Well, I can still play it on the Slith to shut off the abilities and take slightly less damage by drawing it immediately off of another Visionary. I just don't get to exile the Slith immediately, and there's another reach blocker. That's a huge deal. If Void Craw dies, I can't cast that, though, which is not good. Okay, I'm pretty sure the way that the equipment works is if I Utter Insignificance the Slith, it still has flying because the equipment's on it right now. But I do take less damage. Oh, it does lose flying. That is wild. Lose a single 2/2 to kill it if they don't have another combat trick. If they do, it's not wonderful for us, but both the Visionaries drew us a card, so it's not super bad. Well, that's great. So they'd have to re-equip it to give it flying again. Post Utter Insignificance, I guess? Alright, Evolution Witness certainly keeps the pressure on. Being able to pick up that flyer is massive. I don't have the energy for Aether Spike to matter here. They have the additional 3 mana on top of the auxiliary. 1 from a land, 1 from a Dryad, 1 from a spawn. So we got a Warped Tusker here, and technically we still get to hold up Aether Spike because of the Eldrazi spawn token. So if they misplay and do anything else with their mana pre-auxiliary, then we can counter it. Alright, can't counter it, but I could kill an Eldrazi spawn? No, I would just tap the Dryad. Yeah, no, it's definitely not worth spiking here. We're just tapping Dryad in a Plains. The auxiliary would still resolve, still do all this nonsense. I guess I get to counter a Hexgold Slith at least. Sack an Eldrazi spawn to kill a 2/1. Seems like a fine deal. When they have a Mandibular Kite on board. Just the Nightshade Dryad, yeah, that's awkward. Alright, yeah. We trade the Eldrazi spawn up here. Get the 7th mana for Lurker, so that I don't have to tap Voidcraw to play it. Sure. Then I can start sending Lurker in, although it does just end up trading into the Dryad. Go to 1 here. Yeah, that's pretty bad. I could top deck lethal, actually. Well, no, I couldn't. Because I can't survive this and keep Tusker on board. So say if I could block auxiliary and survive, I could. 15, 16, 17, 18? No, even then we would 2 damage off. Alright. Yep. Pressure is really on here. Oh my god. It's one of the top 3 highest win rate cards in the whole format. I actually think it might be number 1, and that is nothing to stop flyers at this point. Yeah, we just really needed to hit more interaction here. We hit 1 insignificance and 1 bounce spell. That's it outside of the counters. That's pretty rough. We have a lot of bounce in this deck. And a lot of utter insignificances. Yeah. Just a great aggro deck. We just have to hit more interaction than we did this game. Too much pressure from all the flying. Is there any points in playing things out here? They hit us with a single flyer, we're dead. Is there anything we can draw into that hits? Blocks 2 flyers. Nope. We've got utter insignificances and a binding and a demon fear, but those all deal with 1 card. Petrifying Meddler? Petrifying Meddler could do it. Stun 1 and then block the other thing they give flying. So we stun auxiliary and block whatever they give flying. But would I have the mana up for it? No, because my only way to draw a card is to spend 4. And then I only have 4 mana up. I'm 1 mana off from even playing a Petrifying Meddler. Yeah, we're dead no matter what. Alright. Game 2. This is a rough matchup to start off with. I don't think it's unwinnable, but we have got to hit more interaction than we did there. And we don't have any interaction to put into the deck unless we had taken landscapes more highly to side in these Fanged Flames. We could put an Electrozoa in here, actually, to trade off into the 3/3 flyer. We don't really care about keeping it around, we just care about flashing it in and trading it off. It actually seems reasonable. That's an extra piece of interaction for the 3/3 flyer. The Meddlers are massive here. We can hit any Meddlers, those are going to be incredibly helpful too. What do we cut? A Dread Mask, probably. Just another top end card and try to stay a little lower to the ground this time. More cheap interaction. Makes sense to me. We'll drop a Dread Mask for an Electrozoa to stop some more flying damage and hop back in there. The Electrozoa is pretty bad against the 1/1 Germ with flying, but it's pretty good against the 4 mana 3/3 flyer. It's not even like an incredible sideboard option here, but it's a decent one. It feels better than Dread Mask. That just feels too slow for this matchup. I've got multiple 7-drops in hand. But I also have another Malevolent Rumble. But I want to hold up all my mana for Sink into Stupor, and I can cycle these. Yeah. I'll take the Utter Insignificance here, actually, and just really, really make sure I'm loaded up with cheap interaction for this matchup. Sick draw, legitimately. Top decking the land, so I don't need to rumble into it. I think we hold up Sink into Stupor, and then I can rumble and Utter Insignificance in the same turn next turn. And I think we let the Slith hit for 1, or sorry, hit for 2 here, because I can always just bounce it later and get rid of all its counters. See if they play anything scarier. If they don't, then we just took an extra 2 damage to see if something scarier comes, and that is something scarier. Shield counter on target permanent or proliferate. If it shield counters the Slith, we're definitely bouncing the Slith. I think we wait for it to resolve to give them the option of shield countering the Slith or proliferating. If they do either of those things, we bounce the Slith. They just shield counter the Rhino, we just bounce the Rhino, I think. Although, well, do we? Because then they can choose again later and, like, proliferate on it. Yeah, I don't hate just, like, bouncing the Slith and then making the Rhino a 1-1. They have a 1-1 with a shield counter that I can just exile later anyway. That feels probably a little better. They get extra energy here, but it seems like their only energy card we've seen is the Hexgold Slith anyway. Meddler for sure, right? Such a huge stabilizer, but we do need the mana for these 7s. Oh, and Ugin's Binding's in the grave? Mill that Ugin's Binding. Since we've milled the Ugin's Binding, let's really make sure we're casting these 7-drops. Well, we're casting one of them, at least. Turn each non-land we don't control, so I actually just take this, because I don't want to Utter Insignificance and then bounce everything with the Ugin's Binding anyway. We save the Insignificance for post-binding. Yeah, this is huge. Huge stabilization on this. We go for the Lurker over the Tusker and bounce their board, and then start sending that in every turn. Malevolent Rumble for a Chumper for the Lurker. Find a Thraben Charm. It's going to take a while, but it could kill a Lurker. Oh yeah, they can't pick it up. It's not a permanent. Never mind. Three mana up. They can replay the Rhino, so they can shield counter Chump here. Yep. So Chump with a shield counter. But we're just going to drop another 7-drop and try to keep the pressure on them. Well, it's not if I don't hit a mana here. Yeah, no 7-drop, so we just play as many creatures as we can still. So Visionary plus Harvester. Goodbye to the shield counter. No, it takes 7? Alright. Big schmoves. Find an Aether Spike. I think we have to ditch these for mana. With 3 different instant speed options, it's better to hold these up than it is to play Tempest Harvester. And I love, now that we've seen the Ugin's Binding Malevolent Rumble combo, that's actually so huge for our deck that we have like mill 8 in here alongside the Ugin's Binding to make it even more consistent, that we can get a big bounce out of that. Because that's the strongest thing our deck can do, is exile that Ugin's Binding from grave. And that just makes that happen a lot more often. We don't even have to draw it and cast it. Lifelink on the modified creatures. And then we spike the Watchdog. They have a spawn here, so we have to choose 2. They get a lifelinking chump now, which is kind of annoying. Okay, there's the Tusker mana, so we're definitely just casting a Tusker. Alright, just an Eldrazi spawn chump. Have I milled any of my bounce here? Or can we draw more bounce? Because bouncing that Rhino would be incredible at this point. We did mill a Demon Inferior. So what do I have left? Petrifying Meddler and 2 Utter Insignificance. We might have to exile the Envoy with an Utter Insignificance just to shut off all this lifelink. Signature Slam. Ooh, gross. Gain 5,000 life and kill a 7/7 for 3 mana. It's completely filthy. Speaking of completely filthy, Meddler is pretty good. But I really want to shut off this lifelink. I guess Utter Insignificance shuts off the lifelink. We get rid of the ability with that anyway. Slide Meddler, the shield counter card. They have no good attacks, and we can still Utter Insignificance the lifelinker whenever. And then none of their modified creatures have lifelink anymore. That makes a lot of sense. Dread Mask, sure. If I utter Insignificance the Envoy right now, I don't have a colorless mana for it in the future. I'm just gonna tune. This is 5 mana total. I can do this and still do the full Utter Insignificance. So we see what we draw first. Another Utter Insignificance and a Lurker. Don't actually know what we have to draw first here. Insignificance isn't good against the Watchdog or the Germ anyway. Probably draw the Lurker first. They can triple block our Tusker. We can clear out the Envoy and the Germ and force re-equips with the Dread Mask. But re-equips with the Dread Mask is enough to hold up the blockers here. Yeah, this is rough. I just have to still set up a bit here. That signature slam was like the play of the game. They'd be at like 8 or 7 right now or something. They didn't gain that like 9 life. Yeah, it was a 9 life gain. So it's actually was like 6 here. That's really bad for me, but probably not game, and insignificance doesn't actually do anything in response. Yeah, they still send in with 2 8/8s even if I insignificance any of this. Yeah, that's pretty horrific, actually. Again, it's not like literal instant game, but definitely is in the grand scheme of things. No, I need my colorless source. Pretty badly. Put a 2/2 there. Hold up. This Envoy can't block anything. The Rhino can trump the Tusker and they take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's not lethal. Oh yeah, and the Watchdog is Vigilance. Watchdog Fangs is insane. 8/8 permanently now? And the Germ is too? I mean, this is the best we got. I guess I could block with a 6/8 and a 2/2 and try to trade up since I can't attack in anyway. But I think we are waiting for the next insignificance now, awkwardly. Which I guess I can pick up immediately off of Tempest Harvester. Yeah. Kind of have to double block the Germ, but then they can just move the Dread Mask and ruin my life. Oh, yeah, this is real bad. I thought this was going to be the one we could stabilize, maybe at least win one game this round. But on the plus side, as we saw in the first game, this is a pretty horrific matchup. I think a third game with them on the play, we're monumentally unlikely to win anyway. So even if we lose this one that we were trying so hard, it's not like we probably could have won this round even if we won this game. It is a bummer though. They have mega bombs in there too. 6 super solidifies this. You just get to recast cards from grave every turn, and the best card in the format. The Ocelot Pride back at it again. I mean, it showed up too late each game to actually do its thing at least, but then they just put a Dread Mask on it. Yeah, no, this is just... They've got way higher card quality and a deck that's already well positioned. There's no turning things around from here. We have 1 Annoyed Altasaur left in our deck when it comes to big cards. Outside of that, it's 2 Mana Dorks and Electrozoa, 1 Utter Insignificance, and 1 Aether Spike. No combination of these cards turns the game around from here. I'm moving on to round number 2 and hoping for a better matchup. Here we are for round 2 on the play. Nice little keep here, starting with the Tempest Harvester to set up our draws. Wait for Foreboding Landscape first. Suppose. Let's get the tap land out of the way. Perilous Landscape to start from our opponent. Blue, red, or white mana off of that. They're going to grab blue. Here's Tempest Harvester. Probably got to cycle Tusker towards these top-end cards this game. Tune the narrative. Draw a card, get double energy. Drop a Sheltering Landscape. And it's another white deck. Blue-white is also the most evasive deck out of everything in the format. So this is going to be another rough matchup. Expect to see a lot of flyers here for blue-white energy. It's what it does best. It's got the 2-mana 2/2 flyers that give things lifelink off every attack. It's got the 4-mana 3/3 flyer that puts the +1/+1 counter on 2 creatures. It's got the 3-mana 3/1 flash flyer. It's gonna be rough. There it is, the Riddlegate Gargoyle. Got the insignificance for that, at least. But I think we wait for now, get mana efficient with the Tusker towards ramping into an Altasaur as the big blocker. Five out of 7 mana now. Definitely send the Harvester in. We're pretty happy with that trade. I mean, we could hold it off to draw and discard a card here, but we already have a pretty clear game plan with what we have right now. Cycle a Lurker, cast it Utter Insignificance, cast Altasaur next turn. That's the game plan. I guess I'm 1 mana off from doing that, because I can't cycle the Lurker and cast Utter Insignificance without sacking an Eldrazi spawn, and I would need all the Eldrazi spawn to still be around to cast Altasaur next turn, so we have to choose whether or not we want to Insignificance the Gargoyle here, or get the spawn we need to play Altasaur. They are full on blue, white, red. There's the Scurry of Gremlins to get a bunch of energy and buff their board many times. Give everybody +2, +0, and haste this turn. For huge damage. Yeah, this is kind of a nightmare scenario here where we really have to hold off of our good spells, don't we? I take 10 damage if I don't block, because they can spend 4 energy to do +1/+1 again. So they're threatening 7 or 10 damage. I can chomp Utter Insignificance and exile the Gargoyle here to just take 2 and just slow things down quite a bit. But that slows me down as well, where I don't get to do anything next turn. I can still cycle the Lurker towards Altasaur the turn after that. I think I can do that. So that is the land I need to cycle the Lurker and guarantee 7 mana next turn. With the ability to give anything they play haste off of this 4 energy, I think we're actually holding Harvester off now. They drop like a Conduit Goblin or something, some good 2/2 on the ground to haste out. The Harvester is actually a threatening blocker to try to trade into that. And we can draw and discard while trading into their 2/2 thing. Oh, so instead it is a giant flyer. Flying and lifelink every turn. Altasaur still blocks and trades into that if they can't deal with the Altasaur later. But that is huge damage this turn. And we currently haven't drawn any other removal to deal with it. If we draw another Insignificance or any bounces or anything like that, we're still pretty fine. But we haven't drawn any yet. No angel abilities. They didn't haste it or anything either. They're just going to poke for 2. Fair enough. Go to 16. Draw first. Aether Spike? That's pretty bad at this point. We're going to tap out next turn for sure. Then we're going to tap out for Dread Mask. Still need to cycle this for Altasaur. Petrifying Meddler. That is not a bad one at all, but we're not going to play that until after the Altasaur for sure. Rumble's kind of a bummer. Build the Ugin's Binding if we can top deck another 7 mana creature. I've got 7 lands already. I don't think we need Voidcraw. We take the Visionary. We're not very good at consistently spending colorless mana to draw extra cards off of Voidcraw. So Visionary for just the 1 draw and scry is definitely better. Well, we can try to just get 16 power on board and draw into our final 7-drop colorless creature. Just cast a Drownyard Lurker and win on the spot. They've got a lot of energy though, so there's a lot of really explosive things they could do that could kill us really quickly. Electrozoa is the play. Oh my god. That's lethal. Creatures can't block this turn, and they give the whole board +2/+0. Seems good. Alright, well, we're playing Electrozoa against their 2/2 flyer and their Electrozoa and stuff like that. We're dropping something a bit slower again. Maybe just like a Tune the Narrative actually this time. Yeah, actually Tune the Narrative is literally just like a cycler. We can just drop that. And hop back in there. Oh, I didn't even notice until now that I'm just staring at the loading screen with nothing but our usernames. We're actually up against Mr. Metronome here, part of the Lords of Limited podcast. Highly recommend the podcast if you've never heard it before. That makes me feel a little better. If I have to get just crushed by aggro decks when I draft a deck that's weak against aggro, at least let me get crushed by some great content creators like Mr. Metronome. Feels a little better here to get these rough matchups. If they're cool opponents. Definitely on the play, definitely keep. And let's go. There's the Ugin's Binding. We can find colorless creatures this game, that'll be helpful. Just gonna Aether Spike immediately. Because we're not great at holding mana up, even with an Ugin's Binding in the hand here. Royal Cartographer. Sure. Get a bunch of energy. Have a nice value play for a grindy game. The double landfall trigger for extra energy value is very cute. Foreboding Landscape for us. Visionary, see what we find. We can Demon Inferior afterwards. We do find the Drownyard Lurker. I like both of these draws, so I'm not going to use the Landscape, plus the Landscape gives me colorless for Voidcrawl later. Actually, should have worded this differently. We need the land next turn, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. Oh yeah, that's actually a punt. The ordering was so wrong there. We could have played Lurker next turn if I did this differently. Well, that's fine, because I probably wouldn't want to like Ugin's Binding into Lurker immediately anyway. Although I would want to just play a Lurker in the first place. Maybe I actually just Malevolent Rumble and pick up this Utter Insignificance instead of dealing with the Cartographer. Yeah, I think that's actually fine. Well, Meddler I think I like a little better. That's the 4th card. Bunch of mana up past turn. So just hold up the Aether thingy here against the Meddler. Sure, I'll cast Meddler before I try to do any Lurker stuff. Still have 2 mana up, casting a Meddler. Meddler resolves, maybe gets killed by an instant. They can Aether Zoa trade into Visionary, but that's fine. So 2 damage. Dog Umber the Meddler, sure. Binding picks up Dog Umbra. So we just need to math towards lethal damage on board. And Petrifying Meddler's 4 power can count towards that for the binding combo. Emissary of Soulfire, sure. Some Exalted nonsense. Super fine. Goes to our turn. There's our own Electrozoa, so I can Electrozoa and Ugin's Binding here. Don't think it's quite gonna find lethal that quickly. We probably block if we send in the 2/2, but I think it's worth trying to get that damage in. We kind of have to bounce Cartographer, though, to stop the draw 3. Yeah, fair enough. Cartographer's back. He taps out for basically anything here. I think I'm just going to Binding, even though it's not quite lethal. It's 10 damage, put him to 8, and he's got no board. It's got all the energy in the world, though. Okay, he's not tapped out. I mean, he can counter the Lurker, but he can't counter the ability of Ugin's Binding, unless he's got Thraben Charm. I think he can counter that. But then obviously I keep the Lurker if he Thraben Charms here. I guess Dog Umbra would get picked up here. Yeah, Dog Umbra would get picked up, and he's got the mana to recast the Dog Umbra immediately. We've got pretty solid other lines where I can Demon Inferior and play into Voidcraw. Like, just keep being annoying about this Cartographer. Seems pretty reasonable to me. Maybe even using that on Dog Umbra would have been better here. Like some Flood over there. There's the Voltstorm Angel. 2 mana up still for a Dog Umbra recast. Or to counter the Lurker, but that doesn't counter the ability. Got an Utter Insignificance once he resolves the threat. Alright, no counter. Dog Umbra can happen, but that's pretty fine at this point. Just re-equip the Meddler, or reattach to the Meddler. Go to 10. Yep. Emissary. 15 energy for Mr. Metronome. Tap out for the Angel. Can utter an insignificance and exile that. And then he's got 1 blocker up to Chump Lurker and take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Go to 3 life. Actually, if I insignificance the Emissary, he has to chump with the Angel. I mean, either way, he has to chump with the other one. So it doesn't really matter. All right. 1-1 heading into game 3. That was a much better game for us. Obviously, doing the Ugin's Binding thing was huge. So that was super helpful, but even with just a little more Insignificance Demon Inferior stuff, I think Metronome just had a slow enough hand there. Our deck has the time to actually get to those big plays and start doing the thing, so just hope Metronome's deck in general is going to be a bit slower like that, but this third game he is going to be on the play. For the full aggro, if he's got a great curve out, we might just die. I don't think it's worth running a 1-mana 1/1 to help prevent that at all, though. I think we've done pretty much the sideboarding we can do, slapping the Electrozoa in for just a flash trader. Trade off with something. A little bit more to affect the board. Alright. Let's head into game 3, see how this round wraps up for us. Alright, here's our opening hand for the final game. We have the 7-drop and the Ugins Binding. The Void Craw to ramp up, so it's a keep. But Mr. Metronome obviously is on the play here, so he can still find some great aggro and try to kill us before we do anything crazy. And there it goes, the turn 2 Riddlegate Gargoyle, already a more aggressive start than last game, and that is not good for us. Poke for 2. Insignificance into Void Craw, then I have a 1/3 blocker for the 1/1 next turn. This lets me tap out into the Void Craw. The only issue would be if the 3-drop is significantly better than Gargoyle, and from what we've seen so far as I remember, Metronome just has a bunch of 2-drops. Oh, main phase Electrozoa? Sure. So that hits for, what, 3 here? Feel like that's fine to get the Void Craw out sooner. Be able to double spell. We've only seen Dog Umbra for actual removal from Mr. Metronome so far, which does not stop the Void Craw. I think there might have been a Thraben Charm. It got discarded or something at some point. I don't think there was ever one that got cast. No, I don't think we've seen Thraben Charm in this matchup. Just Dog Umbra. Another Riddlegate Gargoyle? Alright, I mean, it's bad. Certainly bad. But Tusker for a reach blocker is going to be huge, especially when I get to bounce their whole board when I cast it. The awkward part is we need to exile this Gargoyle before we bounce everything, or we just lose in utter insignificance. And I don't have the mana to do that? Oh yes, I do. I have exactly the mana to do that. I can Ugins Binding plus exile the first Gargoyle as the play next turn. And that is what we would want to do, because we wouldn't want to play another utter insignificance when I'm about to bounce everybody anyway. Lane cycle the Angel of the Ruins here to guarantee the Voltstorm Archangel as the play next turn. And then we can Ugins Binding the Voltstorm Archangel. But that still buffs the rest of the board for extra damage on this swing. Still a big deal. Yeah, I can't really afford to do another insignificance when I'm about to Ugins Binding the board. So I have to bounce this before the beginning of combat, is what this is? Okay, here's the move to combat. Bounce that before it gets the trigger. Hit for 5. Exile this Gargoyle. Down to 11, and we need to top deck non-lands from here. But then we will have a shot if we hit just more big stuff, pretty much. Really, if we're just hitting on lands, period. Just more bounce spells and utter insignificances and stuff work great too. Yep, go for a wide board to get around the reach. Gargoyle plus Electrozoa. Crack a landscape. Bloodmaster over here. We have to just pass. I can crack Voidcraw for a card. I guess I can do that right now because the Voidcraw and the Spawn don't do anything as blockers anyway, but having the colorless to fully exile something with utter insignificance could still be a big deal. So yeah, Metronome now just probably trying to go as wide as possible for big Voltstorm Archangel or Scurry of Gremlins kind of swing. Drownyard Lurker. That lets us start actually getting attacks in, which is quite a big deal. I do have to pop the Angel while I've got the extra mana. Harvester to help this little top deck situation. Help draw what we need. Really don't like not having the mana to exile this Angel, though. Maybe we need to play real slow. Because if I held off on the Harvester, I could pop the Utter Insignificance in a pinch. If Metronome has bounce spells in there, we haven't seen any bounce storm. Oh god. Double Voltstorm Angel is nasty. Alright. At least it's not something that like punished us for the Utter Insignificance, but that is with 20 energy too. Real wild. Annoyed Altasaur is great, but I need a second green source. 16 cards in, 1 green right now is rough for sure. I mean, Harvester's not doing any blocking, so... Find a forest? Nope. That's actually crazy. 17 cards deep, no green. No second green. Alright, cool. Now I don't have to exile that one. I can save the colorless to draw a card again. Basically, if Metronome draws like Scurry of Gremlins, we're dead. But otherwise, I'm feeling pretty solid here. Actually, Dog Umbra kills us too, because we haven't hit any... I mean, we hit a flying blocker, but we don't have double green somehow. Alright, dig for historic cards. That's artifacts like Riddlegate Gargoyle, sagas and stuff. But it can't be Dog Umbra, that's an enchantment. Not a historic spell. I mean, so that means Metronome is mostly just flooded here, which is great for us. Draw a card. Another Drown Yard Lurker. It's kind of big, but green source is massive. We need to dig for that. This is wild. Halfway through now. This is 4 colorless. If I find the green off of Visionary, I can still play an Altasaur, and if I don't, I can still play Drown Yard Lurker. There we go. And I can order it to hit Petrifying Metaler. Huge. Oh my god, we can pre-combat Petrified Metaler since we order it. Absolutely huge. It's 2 more reach blockers, so we get to just send. Metronome's down to 7. There's another Riddlegate Gargoyle. Did find something off the Monumental Henge, but a lot of Flood over there again. There's a Cannoneer for unblockable swings, but I'm pretty sure he is dead off of an all-attack here, especially with a Sink into Stupor. Block one thing with Cannoneer. Yeah, super dead. No lifelink. That's game. That is 2-1 in our match against Mr. Metronome. That first game, we got absolutely crushed, and I was horrified for the matchup. Just efficient, aggressive curve with a lot of evasive threats. That's exactly the kind of deck that can crush us. Luckily, the next couple games, Metronome hit some slower hands with some 5 and 7 drop kind of plays, and flooded out quite a bit as well while we hit our bomb mythic in each of those games. So I think it was yet another matchup. We were going to have to get pretty lucky to win, but we got pretty lucky. We got to Ugins binding him twice in a row, and each time he was pretty flooded, while we just had great things to do in a top deck war situation with Harvester and double Void Craw for some card draw stuff. So really lucky round there in general. Super happy to be able to squeeze out the win, though, because that means that these next rounds could matter. If we lose one more round of Magic, we're out of the event. But if we can win the next 2, we could still make it into draft number 2. We are not quite out yet at 1-1, heading into round 3, hoping for a couple wins in a row. All right, here we are for round 3, doing our Ugins binding thing again. It's definitely a keep. This is a little low on mana, but Malevolent Rumble can always pick up a land. Well, can very consistently pick up a land. And then Visionary can dig towards land with a draw plus a scry, so we're going to keep and grab blue off of Landscape. Playing against white again, that's 3 for 3 against the most aggressive color. Rough. Oh god, it's Boros. The literal most aggressive deck. Do I need to insignificance the Glyph Elemental over Malevolent Rumble here? Kind of think I do. I've already got my 3rd land to definitely play a Serum Visionary next turn, and I have to do it before I pass, because we can't respond to them playing a land. So if they play a land, this landfall trigger goes on the stack, and even if I respond with utter insignificance, it's going to be a 2-2, because it'll be a 1-1 with a counter on it, so I have to just do this right now. Curve is probably Visionary next turn, then Rumble plus Insignificance after that. Yeah, I think we have to just... If we don't Insignificance this thing, it threatens to be just like a 2-mana 4/4, 5/5 really quickly. Like, it hits us for 3 immediately. Inspired Inventor. Probably get the Servo. Yep. Wide board state over there. Here is... I was gonna say here's Visionary, but Voidcraw, 2 more mana next turn is a huge jump up. Letting us play like a Visionary and a Rumble in the same turn, worst case scenario. I guess worst case scenario is they have Galvanic Discharge or the other Almond Red Burn spell to kill the Voidcraw. Maybe it was worth Visionary just to play around cheap burn. Conduit Goblin. Ooh, yeah, this is as aggressive as our first opponent, maybe even more. Yeah, this is really bad. Both the Conduit Goblins haste in as 3 power creatures, which means Voidcraw has no good blocks. We can cheese our way to 7 mana. We can still potentially stabilize because of how big of a deal Ugin's Binding is. But it's going to be pretty difficult to get there at this point. Did hit a land, so I'm at 6 out of the 7 mana I need for Altasaur at least to help stabilize. And I have enough mana to Serum Visionary plus Ugin's Binding bounce somebody. And there's the land I need for Altasaur, so we ditch those extra lands and hold up Insignificance or Binding or Exile Glyph Elemental. And Visionary gets to trade for one of the Conduit Goblins. Feels solid. So the Altasaur is not a colorless creature, so I can't bounce their entire board off of Ugin's Binding anytime soon. But it'd still be nice to do that in the future. Double buff the Servo. Buff the Glyph Elemental. And the Servo. Oh yeah, go nice and wide here. It's pretty bad. Block, right? Don't remember an instant speed like +2/+1 to everybody in this format. I know the uncommon Scurry of Gremlins thing. Alright, I definitely have to keep Voidcraw on the board. Green's going pretty low here, down to 7. Pray for a good hit off Altasaur. Oh! Yeah, that was bound to happen at some point. Not quite dead to removal, but we're dead to burn. No attacks, no burn. Still got a shot of stabilizing here. Find a Tempest Harvester for this top deck war we've gotten ourselves into. Feels great. Feels really great. I am still, I think, playing 1 land. No, I've got the mana to exile that. But I've got a lot of expensive stuff in this deck. I think I still play a land. Look, with a 2/1 on a 2/2, 1/3 there. Maybe I actually send an Altasaur with Trample. Got an Utter Insignificance backup. Actually think I do. The backup Utter Insignificance. It's like a 4-turn clock swinging in with this thing. Gives them less chances to top deck a Scurry of Gremlins or whatever, which likely kills us even with an Altasaur held back. Again, our on-board blocks are pretty good, and if they play like one big, scary, hasty threat, I've got the Utter Insignificance for that to maintain our good blockers to attackers ratio here. Land for turn. That's it. Let's go ahead and exile the Glyph Elemental. So if I hit any colorless spells, we're super free to cast them and bounce the whole board. That is a colorless spell, but it is not one that triggers the thingy-madoo. I think I hold Tempest Harvester on blocks rather than using it really proactively here. We can just hit with one Altasaur a turn and still threaten to kill them basically next turn. So we'll do that. I don't quite have the mana to draw the card off of Voidcraw even if I play the land, so I'm holding it for Harvester. Maybe we should be a tiny bit deeper on green than 10-6, which is where we're at, right? We did have that really rough Altasaur last game, and here we are still on double green this late, but... yeah, I'm actually going to probably change the mana base for future rounds. Because I feel like I've never been anywhere near, like, too low on blue mana or anything. Anywhere near choked on blue mana. But watch me change the mana base a tiny bit and then just immediately regret it. Draw all green sources. There we go, there's Warped Tusker and a swing for lethal. That is certainly the play. We get to hold up an Utter Insignificance back up here. There's the concession. We actually start our round against a super aggressive Boros aggro deck with a victory in game 1. We are 1-0 in round 3. We actually didn't see any flyers from them, so I'm not convinced that Electrozoa's great here, but it still feels a little better as just a cheap creature to flash in and trade into just even a Conduit Goblin or something than like a big Colossal Dread Mask. That way, our top end cards are all 2 blockers minimum. Altasaur with the Cascade, and these all with the Eldrazi spawn they make, plus these all could trigger an Ugin's Binding if we're really lucky. The Dread Mask is just like a single big germ blocker thing, so I think it's our weakest of the top end cards. But we could also just drop this Tune the Narrative, just the Cycler, and that would be reasonable too. I guess I'll drop the Cycler and add a Forest and get ready for game 2 of round number 3. Alright, this could be awkward, but Tempest Harvester can put in some work for us. It also makes Demon Inferior really cheap, and we can cycle one of these lurkers for sure. Like, we've got cheap interaction and Utter Insignificance and a Demon Inferior, plus 1 cheap blocker to trade off with. There is Malevolent Rumble, which is great with the way this hand is looking, making sure that we hit mana, a land, and an Eldrazi spawn. I think we want to play the Harvester here and offer the trade with Conduit Goblin if they swing it. Losing out on the ability to draw and discard is going to be a little rough here, but I think it's worth the life gain because we can still rumble into basically a guaranteed land next turn, which then leads into the 3-drops being open of cycling all these lurkers into mana, so on from there. Trading a Siege Smash instead. Trading a Dog Umbra, sure. Still slow them down. They don't get to play another creature this turn. We've traded our 2-drop off into the equivalent of if they had cast another 2-drop creature and hasted it into that. Hit the land naturally, so I could Demon Inferior the Conduit Goblin. I actually don't mind that at all, just really slowing them down the best we can. Since I already have my land for turn, I don't have to draw it off Malevolent Rumble here. Do that next turn. There's another Conduit Goblin. Wow, alright, we really need to hit the land here, so we rumble into the mana to have an Utter Insignificance up. I like Petrifying Meddler, but certainly can't afford to draw it with the curve of this hand. Beginning of combat on your turn, pay 1 energy, give another creature +1/+0 haste till end of turn. So if I Utter Insignificance this Conduit Goblin, I'm reducing the damage it deals by 1 and reducing this one by 3. So I'm stopping 4 damage by Utter Insignificancing this Goblin before they move to combat. And they're moving to combat, so we Utter Insignificance this one, so the other one doesn't haste for 3, and this one only hits for 2 instead of 3 damage. They have 6 energy though, so I think they will spend it. Nope, they're just going to hold on to it. All right, then it hits for 1. Okay, it's mana number 6. I could cast a Dread Mask, but I can also cycle a Lurker to guarantee Altasaur next turn, which is a way better way to stabilize. We're at 19, we can hold off here. Oh boy. Yeah, I really hope we can stabilize hard off this Altasaur, because this is a terrifying matchup with like a whole playset of Conduit Goblins in their deck. Just insane. So let's cycle this Lurker and see if we draw a land off of it. If we do, I can afford to sack a spawn here, which means I chump 3 and sack to exile. If I don't hit a land, though, which I didn't, then I don't know that I can play Altasaur next turn unless I have both of these spawn, because if I don't top deck another land, I only have 6 mana, not 7. I was really hoping we could cycle the Lurker into a land, because our blocks would be incredible if we could do that. I'll still have 6 mana up, and worst case scenario, play a Void Craw. If I hit a land, I still play an Altasaur. I go to 12 here? I think I can go to 12. The stopping 4 damage and permanently getting rid of the first Conduit Goblin is so tempting. But if I don't top deck exactly land, it means no Altasaur. I think I have to lock in on Altasaur. Go to 12. We top decked exactly land. God dang it. Well, then I leave another spawn for later. Come on, Altasaur, not the counterspell, please. Electrozoa, sure, good enough. 2 blockers. I'll take it. Now we're stable. If they don't have any kind of bomb rares or anything, we just start casting more 7 drops. We go for a Lurker, then we go for a Dread Mask, and they are just not breaking through. They need a big card to flip the game around, since we got to resolve the Altasaur and it hit another blocker. There's some big cards in this format, though. It is a Modern Horizons set. Smelted Charge Bug, that's really threatening. Because they can haste it off of a Conduit Goblin and it can give Menace wherever they want. So that can sneak some damage in here. Really happy to actually have 1 Eldrazi spawn left behind to help with that. Because then we just lose an Eldrazi spawn to the Menace trigger instead of losing an Electrozoa. We can still force it to be basically a chump attack. I think we need to try to stop the max damage as we can, but mainly kill the max number of creatures we can if they go for swings. But they don't, they save it for later. Get another Void Craw here. If I play a Lurker, I sack the spawn, but I make a new one anyway, so pretty fine. Double Void Craw leads to just playing whatever I want in the future, though. But I think Lurker is just an incredibly big deal. Starting to whittle away their board while holding all of our blockers up is pretty large. Where did our first 2 energy come from this game? Oh, Tempest Harvester, that's right. I was going to say, I cut the little energy cycler thing. I'm surprised this Electrozoa gets to remain untapped basically as long as we need it to be. 3 more turns. By then we should have plenty of other blockers. Oh. Right, that card's a thing. Well, I can still block with an Electrozoa. Really hope they don't have 2 of that card in their deck. That'd be their biggest out to kill me here. They just do that 2 turns in a row and we're dead. Take 7, go to 5. That's all we can do. That's our only choice. And we need them to not have another copy of that thing. Because we got no more flying blockers. Five life. Charge bug is 1/2. Goblin is 1/2/3. That's 5 damage on board. That's lethal. If they have another... There's absolutely nothing I can do about that, so we just play the safest for if they don't have that. Even if I hold up Utter Insignificance mana, another Sundering Eruption kills us. I exile this, but again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, dead. So I think I play 2 Void Craws instead of holding up Insignificance here for maximum blockers. I guess it's better to hold up the mana for an Insignificance if they have like a second charge bug. They haste that charge bug, then they attack with 4 menace creatures. But if they have a second charge bug and I can exile this, then they just attack with 3 menace creatures still. Block 2 of them, only 1 of them gets in. A 5th creature doesn't help, as only an even number of creatures matters against menace. I'm going to play around another charge bug here. I don't know if that's right, but we can't play around the eruption, so if they have that, they have it. This is a little worse against a removal spell. We block 1 menace creature, exile the small conduit goblin, take a couple points of damage. Alright, landscape and fetch. No buffs, it looks like. No buffs. We exile this conduit goblin. I could, like, utter Insignificance and exile one of these to force a chump, but that's pretty risky against, like, top-decked removal from them. I think I just hold on to the utter Insignificance to ruin their day when they try to find some kind of crackback lethal. But sending both of these in already forces 1 chump if they don't have instant speed removal. But I'm just going to hold on to this instead of exiling the other blocker here. Can Dreadmask and still hold up Insignificance? Alright, final draw step for them. Guess I don't have the mana to Insignificance and exile, but Insignificance still makes their creature lose all of its abilities and become a 1/1, so I can do it after they give it Menace or whatever crazy ability they're going to give it. Send in the Conduit Goblin. Block with a big germ. Maybe there's an argument to block with the whole board, in case they have multiple, like, trample tricks here. But I could utter Insignificance after they all resolve to put it back to 1/1 stat line. Alright, that was a really solid match for us. We just hit great defensive plays early. Really, the recoveries from Altasaur in both of those games, having our one copy of Altasaur in both, was excellent, so... super solid defensive stuff from the deck, surviving the early onslaught of just all the Conduit Goblins there. Could have been a very losable matchup thanks to their Sun Eruptions if they had those at the right time. Certainly could have lost one or even both of those games, but got pretty lucky again, and we are now 2-1. We've made it to the final battle of the Arena Open Day 2 Draft number 1. So pretty happy with that, however things fall from here. We are in contention for Day 2 Draft 2. This final round is going to determine everything, so we'll see how it all wraps up as we head into the final battle. Here we are on the play for the final battle, and we know the game plan, binding into these lurkers. And cycle the lurker to hit the other one early, and we have a cheap Utter Insignificance for more cheap interactions, so 2 pieces of interaction to stay alive, and then cast a lurker, bounce the whole board, and hope that that stabilizes. A little harder for that to stabilize without other cheap creatures to play. We're just going to be against a white-based aggro all 4 rounds. I should not have mentioned what my worst matchup was at all. Apparently I've put a real bad omen on us today. Luckily, this opponent does not have a 2-drop, so already a great start for us. Oh, they have a bomb rare 2-drop. Disregard. Whenever Ophelia attacks, exile up to 1 other non-land permanent at the beginning of the next end step, return it with a +1/+1 counter. So Ophelia just exiles our blockers every turn, or exiles their own cards to buff them and get the enter the battlefield effects again. So we let her chill for now, until we see what they're going to do with her, I guess. Metastatic Evangel, whenever another non-token creature in this battlefield under your control proliferates. Are they stuck on 2 mana here? They might be stuck on 2 mana here. I can Insignificance the Ophelia, shut off all her abilities forever, or I can just Binding one of these and take 2, or Binding Ophelia and take 0. When they're stuck on mana, Binding does look pretty good. It's just Binding the Evangel thing, I guess. Because we want to Insignificance the Ophelia, most likely. It's all mana. I mean, it's going to make sure we can cast the 7s. But we do need more creatures and stuff here. There we go. Tempest Harvester to trade into the Evangel, and that's going to get rid of any flood later. Now we cycle 1 lurker, cast the other next turn. But we don't want to bounce the whole board to the Binding yet, actually. It's aggressive. Maybe I do trade Harvester and Ophelia and then bounce the whole board then. And if I just kill this Evangel, I'm taking like 2 damage next turn, and I can just hold off, and then I can cast both of these instead of having to cycle 1. 2 damage a turn is really not much of a clock. I think I just trade. Find a Demon Inferior. It's interesting. I have to top deck a land to do the thing I want to do. But I can take 2. Serum Visionary, sure. Draw a card, scry 2. Find Malevolent Rumble, find the land we need. Actually, I like Meddler a lot here. I might just rumble into the Meddler. I guess I can mill this forest. Yeah, let's rumble into the Meddler. And that's also the mana we need for a 7-drop next turn if I want to do that. Oh my god, I can Altasaur next turn? Sure. We're just going to Altasaur next turn and save the bounce everybody for later. And they're so stuck on mana here. Kept a monocolored 2-lander and just got mega punished. Where we're going to be insanely stable once we can just cast a 7-drop each turn. Oh boy, the Wombo combo. We did it. Altasaur Meddler is such an insane cascade. Jolted Awake gets cycled, looking for mana. They find the red source. I don't think we're bouncing the board. I think we're swinging all and dropping Lurker. No bounce here. So that I still have that backup plan later. Alright, they concede. It's just way too much big stuff. That was just really poor luck for our opponent. A somewhat risky keep that really didn't pan out for them, so we get a free win to start off this round, which is super, super helpful because their deck looks quite scary. Boros aggro with a 2-drop bomb. So the real problem with Feely is that she gets to keep exiling our blockers every time they swing in, and we just cannot block any early damage. Not only can she exile blockers to hold them off for a turn, but she can permanently exile Eldrazi spawn tokens to force us to like sack them during our opponent's turn and not have the mana to ramp into our 7-drop. So I'm very scared of Philia and their color pair in general. It's a very aggressive color pair, as we saw last round. So scary matchup where we want as much cheap interaction as possible, and since we don't have the good fixing to splash in the Fanged Flames, we run an Electrozoa again and probably drop a Dread Mask. Not only is this a very late game play, it's our only very late game play that isn't 2 creatures worth of value or like a creature plus a stun to really hold things off, and it plays miserably against Philia. They can exile the Germ token forever on a swing. So I'm going to drop Dread Mask actually for Electrozoa here and keep the Tune the Narrative in this time towards the little Aether Spikes here. Again, the Aether Spikes are so awkward with this deck because they make the Altasaur worse, but we don't have much other options here, so we're going to roll with it. Heading into Game 2 of the final battle. So we didn't get to see any of their removal, any of their interaction, as far as I remember. So no specific interaction to really keep in mind, but we can keep in mind that they have Ophelia as an instant speed card. I believe this is our first hand all day that we've had to mulligan. That was another bit of good luck for us, but it does catch up here. We're going to have to mulligan this. I can't just island into Tune the Narrative, hope for the best. I mean, with double Serum Visionary, if we make it to 3 mana, we can really hope for the best, but it's so risky. I'm going to take the mulligan there. This is certainly better. I can sink into Stupor in a real pinch, and the Meddlers can really help stabilize. Turn 1 Tune, turn 2 Harvester to trade into something. I think we have to ditch one of the Meddlers, even though they're so good at stabilizing here. I could ditch a Tune, but I definitely don't think I can ditch the sink into Stupor. Alright, on the play, turn 2 Hexcult's is a nightmare. They can first strike it in on swings to guarantee the +1/+1 counter, because Harvester won't be able to block, but then Harvester can still trade into it the turn after that. Utter insignificance. Alright. It's decent. I think we have to just play Harvester, though. Really, really hoping to draw land here so I don't have to shoot myself in the face for 3 to play my Serum Visionary next turn, but if I have to do it, I'll do it. Yep, pay for the first strike, and we do not have reasonable blocks. But we will next turn. Party Thrashers are great value play. Discard their weakest card to turn it into whatever they want out of the top 2, and we got a real lucky draw there. We did hit a mana, so we can have another 2 power blocker against this Slith. I could Rumble here to try to lock in the Meddler for next turn, I guess. Okay, definitely need land for turn off the top, so I don't have to stupor myself. But I think we are keeping Utter Insignificance, because we actually don't have any 7-drops or anything bigger right now, so I don't need to scry away Insignificance for more mana. Alright, they're going to do the Thrasher to prevent Flood here, find a Siege Smash or a Precursor, probably Precursor as the play for a Menace swing. But who knows? They could Siege Smash to get the Slith through for damage, that would be reasonable too. Precursor it is. And here it is, so no attacks this turn, which is nice. Nice and lucky. I don't think we draw a card, discard a card here, because we like the whole hand and the top deck right now. 1 mana off from a Meddler. I can Rumble this Insignificance into my hand and have the spawn token on board that I need to play a Meddler next turn. That also lets me hold up Sink It to Stupor or Utter Insignificance. So it feels very solid. Find a Warped Tusker. Super, super slow. Feel I have to take another Utter Insignificance here. Next turn we play like a tapped Stupor and crack the spawn to play a Meddler. It's pretty good. We play one of these Insignificances on the Precursor. Or on the Skyclaw, that works too. And if they attack with Precursor, I'll Insignificance it, kill it with a 1/1. Okay. Can only Insignificance 1 card here. So I can Insignificance kill a Precursor without losing a creature. Take 4. Or I can double block Thrasher, trade a Harvester into it, and Insignificance the Precursor, take 1. Or take 4 still, actually. Because 3 from Slith, 1 from Precursor. Yeah, and we actually just play the big Reach Stunner next turn, so we're not actually scared of Skyclaw. I mean, so the play is to Insignificance the Precursor no matter what here. No matter how we want to block. I think we want to get rid of their card draw engine. Just keep taking 1 a turn from this Precursor thing. That's fine. Although this costs us a card to kill it, and blocking the Precursor doesn't cost us a card, I still think it's worth stopping the Thrasher. Alright, well this definitely needs to be played. Towards Altasaur now. We Rumble for a spawn and a land, and we play Altasaur the turn after that. So next turn we have Rumble plus Insignificance on the defensive. Okay, Detective's Phoenix is pretty good because they can bestow it onto the Slith later, but that's going to be quite a bit later. Okay, Thraben Charm's incredible. Alright, that's a nightmare. That's an actual nightmare. That's a game-ending level play. Alright. Starting to look like ripperonis here. That's the mana to lock in Altasaur. Next turn. We don't have the Ugin thing engraved, do we? We don't. I think I still take this. Next land's gonna be redundant. I mean, I guess it lets us keep an Eldrazi spawn. That is something. Another card trying to help stabilize. You know what I just realized? Next land would have let us fully exile something to the utter insignificance instead of just making it a 1/1, but we're just going to make something a 1/1 and kill it with Visionary. I guess this lets me do this, though, and still have the spawn to play Altasaur next turn. So I can get a chump here. There's Electrozoa to kill the Phoenix, but they've got the evidence they need, which is not good. Have we hit any of our counterspells? Oh god, we didn't hit either counterspell? There's 2 counterspells in here to ruin the Altasaur. It's still our best play. Oh good, we hit a Serum Visionary. That's far from the worst case scenario. We find an utter insignificance, we'll keep it. Use it on the Phoenix so we can exile this and they don't get anything back from grave. Land for turn. Yes. We're looking solid. Don't have any pressure, though, any amount of damage. We have to insignificance this Phoenix, or they can just keep bestowing it onto other stuff. So I can't attack with Altasaur. I need to block Slith. They hit any energy. I guess I can chump Slith. If I insignificance the Phoenix and exile it, I can attack with Altasaur here to start putting pressure on them, and I have chump blockers. Only way this doesn't work out for us is if they have Wing It to send it into the sky, but I have Electrozoa to flash in a nightmare scenario there. I don't actually have another Tempest Harvester to discard this to draw a card, so I probably just play it. They're not a black deck that's going to make me discard or anything. Okay. Flames a Visionary. Force a Chump is the play, but I have Electrozoa, so we still kill here. It's 1 Altasaur versus whatever's in their hand in a top deck war. Hopefully our average spell is bigger than theirs. Because it's a top deck war. But it's a top deck war where we start with a 6/5 trample on board, so it's a favored top deck war. Okay, Evangel does not block Altasaur well, but it does threaten lethal moderately easily. I've got enough energy to counter anything with this Aether Spike, though, so we stop them from lethaling with whatever trick they would use with Evangel. Play a land, hit for 3. And now we Aether Spike anything they use to stop Altasaur, and they have nothing to stop Altasaur, and by the skin of our teeth, we grind our way through 4 aggro decks with our green-blue ramp. We are 3-1, barely making it in to the Arena Open Day 2, draft number 2. And the first round was the losing round as well, which made every round from then on life or death. Make it as exciting and as stressful as possible. What a banger of a draft for the Arena Open. Day 2, draft number 1. Let's take another look at the deck. Really, the only thing in the draft that I think could have gone better, as I said right after the draft, was less speculative picks early towards red. With these Fanged Flames, there were some cheap green removal spells we could have had as options, maybe with a couple more cheap green beefy creatures as well that would have provided us a better matchup against these aggro decks, because those cheap green removal spells also gain a couple points of life, which is a big deal, but you cannot be unhappy with making it to day 2, draft number 2. This is as competitive as a draft event can get on Arena, and we got a positive record here at 3-1, making it into the second draft with a pretty spicy archetype that I have not played too much. So it was really cool stuff, really showing off the power of Ugin's Binding, and that really justified its slot as the pack 1 pick 1 of this draft, of the Binding into Altasaur. See if we get to stick to that game plan. That the power level of Binding in all those games really showed off quite a bit. But also the power level of Altasaur. That was the card we were praying for in a lot of those games to help stabilize. So our pack 1 pick 1 and our pack 1 pick 2 both really working out for us. I think the most awkward part of the deck is definitely the double Aether Spike with the Altasaur. As I said before, Aether Spike weaker in green-blue than pretty much any other archetype, but we took these when we were still speculating towards red, maybe ending up in like blue-red energy. So that's why they kind of made sense as picks at the time, but that's also where things went a little awry in the draft, as I said, where we kept speculating a little towards red. Had we not been hedging our bets towards red as much, we probably wouldn't have been taking these Aether Spikes, and we would have had cards that are a little more consistent, a little better for a blue-green deck, because we're just tapping out so much of the time. When we hit 5-7 mana, we have to just tap out for these. At 3 mana, we have to just tap out for these. It's kind of hard to hold up the Aether Spikes. So these are probably the most awkward cards in the deck. The double Aether Spike here. And again, had we hedged our bets less and just fully committed to blue-green from the start, we would have had another Tusker over a Fanged Flames, and then we could have cut other cards. Cut Aether Spike for a couple other cards to make the deck just a little more consistent, a little better, and maybe find a 4-win run. Although I do think our round 1 opponent had an excellent green-white deck, one of the best green-white modified decks I've seen. Great synergy, huge finishers, and multiple cheap little bombs as well, with the Ocelot Pride, and I don't remember what else they played, but there was something else that was like cheap and really scary. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it was just the Ocelot Pride for a bomb, but just a great aggressive green-white modified deck being our only loss here. Well, that's that. I mean, there's not too much else to say. Great draft. Went way better than I thought. It's a little hard not to get in your head when you lose the first round and be like, oh, this deck just sucks and I'm just going to get steamrolled by all this aggro. I think you could definitely feel it a little bit in game 1 of round 2. I was like, oh, we're just going to lose. It's just more flying aggro stuff. But then in between rounds when I was like, oh, it's Mr. Metronome, he's cool. And the mindset kind of changed to like, well, if I lose, whatever, I lost to Mr. Metronome. I feel like that kind of helped our headspace for future rounds. Maybe I almost got by myself, my own brain just putting myself down here, and then seeing Mr. Metronome just kind of turned it into, oh, this is fun, this is cool, I love his content, it'll be cool to hear about his end of this draft, of this game, all this kind of stuff, and I just got kind of less stressed for future games, which is nice, because usually these are very stressful, very anxiety-inducing games for me. I am not the best at mental head game in really competitive events like this, but anyways, I literally just said a couple minutes ago, let's end the whole spieling and get ready for the second draft, and then I went on to a whole completely unrelated second spiel. Let's finally actually claim our prize. our Arena Open Day 2 Draft number 2 token. We're now locked in for this event in a couple hours. This will be going live for you all tomorrow. Even though it took 2 attempts to get through, we're still going to be up in gems here because we get 5,000 extra no matter what. So we spent, 25,000 gold to leave the event with 10,000 gems. It's pretty excellent stuff because we got up 5,000 from day 1. Now here's another 5,000. So beautiful, beautiful stuff. But obviously, if we can win a few rounds in the second draft, that'd be pretty sick. But we'll see how that all pans out for us tomorrow. Until then, that is going to end today's video. As always, I would like to thank my patrons and YouTube members for their support, as well as you for watching this video. If you're interested in seeing some more like this, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell that YouTube algorithm to send them your way. If you'd like to catch me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below, and if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. But other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.